this later. Okay, guys, well, we're finishing up with the short answer format that we started last week. And it's a mixture of different skills, including punctuation, vocabulary, sentence structure, etc., and also reading comprehension. So let's start with 18. Several artworks found among the ruins of ancient Roman city of Pompeii depict a female figure fishing with a cupid nearby. Some scholars have asserted that the figure is the goddess Venus, since she is known to have been linked with cupids in Roman culture. But University of Leicester archaeologist Carla Brain suggests that cupids may have also been associated with fishing in general. The fact that a cupid is shown near the female figure, therefore, which choice is most logical? We studied Cupid last week. Cupid, supposedly, according to Roman mythology, was child of Venus. And he's the one that has the arrows, that if he shoots you with the arrow, you fall in love with the first thing that you see. And he can do both good and he can do bad too, depending on who's around. So let's see what the right answer is here. Okay. The fact that a cupid is shown near the female figure, therefore, is not conclusive evidence that the figure is Venus. Suggests that Venus was often depicted fishing, eliminates the possibility that the figure is Venus, would be difficult to account for if the figure is not Venus. So because Cupid is associated with fishing, and fishing is what's going on in the artwork, Cupid could be there with or without Venus. And the fact that he's there does not necessarily prove that the female figure in the artwork is Venus. Cupid could just be appearing there because he was considered to be associated with the act of fishing and not just with Venus. So the right answer is A, is not conclusive evidence that the figure is Venus. Good. Okay, 19. Literary agents estimate that more than half of all nonfiction books credited to a celebrity or other public figure are in fact written by ghostwriters, professional authors who are paid to write other blank, but whose names never appear on book covers. So professional writers, authors who are paid to write other people's stories. So this is really a punctuation thing. Other people's, this is the possessive, stories is the plural, okay? Other people's stories, there's no possessive here and there's possessive here. Other people's stories, there's no possessive anywhere. And other people's stories is possessive in both places. So the only right answer is A. Other people's possessive stories, plural. The stories belong to other people, but they're written by professional authors, okay? So the correct answer here is A, and you got to understand where the possessive goes and where it doesn't go. Okay, that's very important. All right, 20. Like other amphibians, the wood frog, Rana sylvatica, is unable to generate its own heat. So during periods of sub-freezing temperatures, it blanks by producing large amounts of glucose, a sugar that helps prevent damaging ice from forming inside cells. So when you increase the osmolarity of the fluid in the cells with glucose, the freezing point drops, basically. So at a certain temperature, it won't freeze as opposed to fluid that doesn't have the sugar in it. So it's a protective mechanism to lower the freezing point of intracellular fluid. So we want to go back and see which is the correct tense, okay? This is really a tense question, the verb tense, okay? So during periods of sub-freezing temperatures, it had survived by producing, it survived by producing, it would survive, it survives. So during periods of sub-freezing temperature, it survives. It's contemporaneous, occurring at the same time as the sub-freezing temperature. So it's okay to put it in the present tense, okay? So had survived, past tense, single event. Survive, past tense, doesn't fit. Would survive, future tense. The only right answer here is the present tense, survives. And it has to be singular, right? Because the frog is singular. So if you read the sentence, so during periods of sub-freezing temperatures, it survives by producing large amounts of glucose. So the right answer here is D. Okay, 21. After a spate of illnesses as a child, Wilma Rudolph was told she might never walk again. Defying all odds, Rudolph didn't just walk, she blanked the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome. She won both the 100 and 200-meter dashes and clinched first place for her team in the 4x100-meter relay, becoming the first U.S. woman to win 3 gold medals in a single Olympics. So she basically was a cripple as a child, and then she grew up and became an Olympian. And actually, not just an Olympian, but a gold medal Olympian in 3 different events. Okay. So basically, you want to go back here, you need contrast here. She didn't just walk, she ran. Okay. All of these are the same. And then there's a dash, fast. And the reason this dash is here is for emphasis. Okay. And you want to know what's the punctuation after fast, because they're all the same here, right? She didn't just walk, she ran fast. Do you put another dash? Do you put nothing between that and during? Do you put a comma? Or do you put a period? Now, let me just go to the next sentence, okay? During the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome, comma, that's a dependent clause. She won both the 100 and 200-meter dashes and clinched first place for her team in the 4x100-meter relay, comma, becoming the first U.S. woman to win 3 gold medals in a single Olympics. That is a complete full sentence, okay? So if you try to attach the sentence before it, it's a run-on sentence. It's just you're taking 2 completely separate complete sentences and just basically patching them together, and it's very awkward and totally incorrect. So what you want here is a period. You want to finish the thought. She didn't just walk, she ran fast, period. Then you start a new sentence. During the 1960 Summer Olympics, and then, of course, elaborates on what she did. So the right answer to 21 to avoid a run-on sentence is to put a period after fast and start a new sentence, okay? So D is the right answer. 22, in many of her landscape paintings from the 1970s and 1980s, Lebanese-American artist Etel Adnan worked to capture the essence of California's fog-shrouded Mount Tamalpais region through abstraction, using splotches of color to represent the area's features. Interestingly, the triangle representing the mountain itself blank among the few defined figures in her paintings. So an abstract basically is a lot of color, a lot of amorphous background. Sometimes you can't really see any object at all. But in her abstract, she would always have a triangle representing the mountain itself, okay? So interestingly, the triangle, which is singular, representing the mountain itself, okay, this basically is an ing clause describing triangle. It's the triangle that is the subject here of the verb. It's singular, right? Triangle is singular. It's not plural, okay? So you got to look for a verb here that's singular. Are is plural. Have been is in the past tense plural, right? Were is plural. The only singular one is. So if you read it, interesting, the triangle representing the mountain itself is among the few defined figures in her paintings. So is the correct answer. So 22 is D. 23, Seneca sculptor Marie Watts' blanket art comes in a range of shapes and sizes. In 2004, Watts sewed strips of blankets together to craft a 10 by 13 inch blank. In 2014, she arranged folded blankets into 2 large stacks and then cast them in bronze, creating 2 curving 18-foot tall blue bronze pillars. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? So again, this is a punctuation question, sentence structure question. So basically, the first sentence says that she made things of different sizes and shapes. And then the second sentence is supposed to give you examples of that, right? So let's look at the first part of this. In 2004, Watts sewed strips of blankets together to craft a 10 by 13 inch blank, okay? Sampler, okay? Is that a complete sentence? Yes, it is. In 2004, Watt sewed strips of blankets together to craft a 10 by 13-inch sampler. Okay, period. Okay. And then what you can do here is put a semicolon. And the reason a semicolon works is because remember, what comes before a semicolon and what comes after a semicolon are complete sentences. But you don't capitalize the second sentence. They're connected in their ideas, but they both can stand alone. So let's look at what comes after the semicolon. In 2014, she arranged folded blankets into 2 large stacks and then cast them in bronze, creating 2 curving 18-foot tall blue bronze pillars. Is that a complete sentence? Yes, it is. So what we have here is 2 complete sentences that are related in the idea they're trying to convey, which is that she does a lot of variety in shapes and sizes. And because they're two clauses that could stand alone as sentences, you can separate them by a semicolon. So the right answer here would be B. Sampler is the end of the first clause, which could be a complete sentence. Then you put a semicolon, it's a connector. And then what comes after it is also a complete sentence. Okay, that's the only way to solve this puzzle. So the right answer to 23 is C. Okay, 24. African-American Percy Julian was a scientist and an entrepreneur whose work helped people around the world to see. Named in 1999 as one of the greatest achievements by a U.S. chemist in the past 100 years, comma, blank led to the first mass-produced treatment for glaucoma. Okay, what was named? The achievement was named. So what needs to follow right after that is the achievement itself. It shouldn't be followed by a time or a person or a circumstance, because your dependent clause here is referring to an achievement. So you have to have the achievement right there. Okay, so let's look at A. Julian. Julian is not an achievement. He's the artist, or he's the scientist. In 1935, that's a date. That's not an achievement. Can't be that. Julian's 1935 synthesis of the alkaloid physostigmine. Aha. The synthesis of the alkaloid physostigmine. That is the achievement. And the possessive here is just describing that it's Julian. So you want this sentence to be here after the comma, because you're saying one of the greatest achievements, okay, in the past 100 years, Julian's 1935 synthesis, the synthesis was the achievement of the alkaloid physostigmine, led to the first mass-produced treatment for glaucoma. Okay, the alkaloid physostigmine is not an achievement. It's a chemical. So if you look at A, B, and D, none of them are the achievement. Only C is the achievement, which the prior clause is referring to. So it has to be C. So 24 is the correct answer. Be careful of that. Whenever you see a dependent clause referring specifically to something, what should follow the comma is that something, not something else. Okay, and a lot of writers make that mistake. The Arctic Alpine Botanic Garden in Norway and the Jardim Botanico of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil are 2 of many botanical gardens around the world dedicated to growing diverse plant blank, fostering scientific research and educating the public about plant conservation. Okay, so this looks to me like a list. Now, remember, when you have a list and you don't have any commas inside any of the objects on the list, you can just separate the list by commas. But when you have a list and some object inside the list requires an internal comma, then you have to separate the objects by a semicolon. So what happens here, okay, is take a look at B. Okay, 2 of many botanical gardens around the world dedicated to growing diverse plant species, comma, both native and non-native. Okay, so there's the internal comma in the object, which means that you need to separate the object with a semicolon. And then if you look at the rest of the objects, fostering scientific research, semicolon, and educating the public about conservation. So essentially, you've got a list separated by semicolons, but the first thing on the list has an internal comma. And that's why you need semicolons to separate it. So the right answer, 25, is B. Okay. Understand that. Remember that. Semicolons are used in two situations. One, to attach two clauses that are standalone independent sentences, but are related somehow. And the other is when a list has objects in it that require an internal comma. And then you need the semicolons to separate the objects in the list. So those are the two things where you'll see semicolons. Sociologist Alton Okinaka sits on the review board tasked with adding new sites to Hawaii's Register of Historic Places, which includes Pi'ilani'ihal, Huia, and Opika, a road bridge. Okinaka doesn't make such decisions blank. All historical designations must be approved by a group of 9 other experts from the fields of architecture, archaeology, history, and Hawaiian culture. So if you look at the answers, he doesn't make the decision by himself, is what they're saying. Single-handedly means by himself. And then you've got to think to yourself, what's the punctuation after single-handedly? Do you just put a however and separate that from a comma, with a comma, or do you put a semicolon? Or do you put a comma here and a comma there? Or do you have no punctuation at all? The important thing to understand here is that the however refers backwards, not forwards. Very important. So here, I'm going to read it both ways, because if you hear me say it, you'll understand it, right? Huey and Opeka, a road bridge. Okinaka doesn't make such decisions single-handedly, however. Now I'll read it as if the however goes for what comes after. Okinawa doesn't make such decisions single-handedly. However, comma, so this would be referring to something after. So in this sentence, it's referring to something past, because what comes after it, all historical designations must be approved by a group of 9 other experts from the fields of architecture, blah, 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 blah. This is a complete sentence. So you can actually put a semicolon between however, which is really completing the previous phrase, and what comes after it. Okay? A semicolon here makes no sense. It should not come before however, right? Unless the however was referring to something afterwards and was a complete sentence. Comma, you could separate it out, but then you've got a complete sentence here, and it's a run-on. And then here, you don't have any punctuation on that. That's unacceptable. So you separate the however with a comma from the previous part of the sentence, but that's the end of that phrase. And then the semicolon starts essentially a new sentence, okay, which could stand alone as a sentence, but it's a related phrase. So the right answer here is A. And that is a tricky, tricky question. Because remember, this however, I could put a period here and then say, however, comma, he makes most of the decisions by himself. But that's not what the meaning of this is. The meaning is that however is referring back to what they previously said, not forward to what comes afterwards. So try to understand that. If you don't understand the meaning, you're not going to punctuate that correctly. Okay? So the right answer, 26, is A. 27. In 1968, U.S. Congressman John Conyers introduced a bill to establish a national holiday in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., period. The bill didn't make it to a vote, but Conyers was determined. He teamed up with Shirley Chisholm, comma, the first Black woman to be elected to Congress, comma, and they resubmitted the bill every session for the next 15 years, period. Blank, in 1983, the bill passed. So you're talking about a prolonged effort over many, many years, right? So you want to have a word here that reflects the fact that this is a long-standing thing, a long-standing effort, 15 years, right? So instead doesn't fit, likewise doesn't fit, finally fits. Finally, in 1983, the bill passed. So that's the only right answer that makes sense in this context of this prolonged effort. So the right answer to 27 would be C. 28. Geoscientists have long considered Hawaii's Mauna Loa volcano to be Earth's largest shield volcano by volume, measuring approximately 74,000 cubic kilometers. Period. Blank, according to a 2020 study by local geoscientist Michael Garcia, Hawaii's Puhahonu shield volcano is significantly larger, boasting a volume of about 148,000 cubic meters. So Michael disagrees. When you disagree with something, you don't use secondly, because that seems you're trying to support what came before. You don't use consequently. You don't use moreover because you're just emphasizing what you said. You use however, because however is basically taking exception. So the only right answer here is they thought it was the largest one. However, according to a study by local geoscientists, it's not the largest one. Okay, this other one, Puhahonu, is the largest one. So you want to put the word however there. And again, the choice of the word is very much influenced by your interpretation of the passage. You have to make it make sense logically. And none of these choices make sense logically, only this one does. Okay? Best way to do it sometimes is just to read it out loud to yourself, quietly. Samuel Coleridge Taylor was a prominent classical music composer from England who toured the US 3 times in the early 1900s. The child of a West African father and an English mother, Coleridge Taylor emphasized his mixed race ancestry, black and white. For example, he referred to himself as Anglo, meaning English, African. Okay? And then there's a period. And now you're starting a new sentence. Blank, he incorporated the sounds of traditional African music into his classical music compositions. So you're basically giving a second example here of his desire to emphasize his mixed race. So what you want to do is you're adding to the evidence of the first statement. He called himself Anglo-African. That's the first piece of evidence that he wanted to emphasize his mixed race. The second one, in addition, he incorporated the sounds of African music into classical music. So you're adding to the evidence of his mixed race desires. So none of these makes any sense, right? Because all of them are somewhat contrary, right? They seem to be indicating an exception. Here, it's an add-on. So in addition is the right answer to 29, the only right answer. Okay. 30. In 2019, researcher Patricia Jurado Gonzalez and food historian Nawal Nasrallah prepared a stew from a 4,000-year-old recipe found on a Mesopotamian clay tablet. When they tasted the dish known as pasrutum, unwinding, I guess it must mean unwinding in this language of Mesopotamia, they found that it had a mild taste and inspired a sense of calm. Blank, the researchers, knowing that dishes were sometimes named after their intended effects, theorized that the dish's name, unwinding, referred to its function to help ancient diners relax. Okay, so they see that the name is unwinding, and it's a term. Unwinding means when you get home from work and you're all stressed out from work, you need some time to unwind, to relax. So that's the name of the dish. And then they found that they ate it and it made them unwind, made them relax. Okay. And so they see the name and then they see the effect and they draw a conclusion. And that's why the word therefore is the appropriate word. Okay, because it logically follows. Therefore, those researchers, knowing that dishes were sometimes named after their intended effects, theorized that the dish's name, unwinding, referred to its function to help people relax. Okay, so it's a logical conclusion based on the information that you're given. And that's why you use therefore. None of these other conjoinders would fit. Okay. 31. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. Okay, let's see what notes. Chemical leavening agents cause carbon dioxide to be released within a liquid batter making the batter rise as it bakes. And you've all seen this with yeast. You know, it releases CO2 and it makes the cake rise, or whatever, or bread. Baking soda and baking powder are chemical leavening agents. They make things rise. Baking soda is a pure sodium bicarbonate. To produce carbon dioxide, baking soda needs to be mixed with a liquid and an acidic ingredient, such as honey. So in other words, you can't activate the carbon dioxide from the baking soda without it being a liquid medium with some acid present in order to basically release the CO2 into the air. Baking powder is a mixture of sodium bicarbonate and an acid. It has its own acid. To produce carbon dioxide, baking powder needs to be mixed with liquid, but not with an acidic ingredient. So what you know here is that baking soda needs to have an acid added to release carbon dioxide, but baking powder does not need to have an acid added. Okay. The student wants to emphasize the difference between baking soda and baking powder. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? And we're going to read all four of them, and then we'll pick the right one. To make batters rise, bakers use chemical leavening agents such as baking soda and baking powder. Tells you nothing about the difference. B, baking soda and baking powder are chemical leavening agents that, when mixed with other ingredients, cause carbon dioxide to be released within a batter. Not specific enough, doesn't tell you the difference between the two. C, baking soda is pure sodium bicarbonate, and honey is a type of acidic ingredient. Doesn't give you the information you want, the difference between baking soda and baking powder. D, to produce carbon dioxide within a liquid batter, baking soda needs to be mixed with an acidic ingredient, whereas baking powder does not. And there it is, the contrast, the difference. So the only right answer here is D. Okay, pretty straightforward. All right, now we're up to 32. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. Sue Sunny Park is a Korean-American artist who uses light as her primary medium of expression. She created her work Unwoven Light in 2013. Unwoven Light featured a chain link fence fitted with iridescent plexiglass tiles. Iridescent means shining, capturing the light. When light passed through the fence, colorful prisms formed. The student wants to describe Unwoven Light to an audience unfamiliar with Sue Sunny Park. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? So you don't know anything about Sue Sunny Park and someone's describing this to you. Which description gives you the best idea, the best vision of what she's talking about? Park's 2013 installation Unwoven Light, which included a chain link fence and iridescent tiles made from plexiglass, featured light as its primary medium of expression. It doesn't tell you anything about the prisms, right? Prisms of light forming. So that's kind of incomplete, right, in its description. Korean-American light artist Sue Sunny Park created Unwoven Light in 2013. Doesn't tell you really anything about it, except the name. C, the chain-linked fence in Sue Sunny Park's Unwoven Light was fitted with tiles made from iridescent plexiglass. Well, that's true, but again, it doesn't tell you the effect that the fence has, that the artwork has. D, in Unwoven Light, a 2013 work by Korean-American artist Sue Sunny Park, light formed colorful prisms as it passed through a fence Park had fitted with iridescent tiles. That gives you the most complete vision of what her art looks like. So D is the correct answer there. 33, while researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. Cambodia's Angkor Wat was built in the 1100s to honor the Hindu god Vishnu. Okay, so it's a Hindu temple, Angkor Wat, Cambodia. It has been a Buddhist temple since the 16th century. So it started out Hindu and then became Buddhist. Decorrelation stretch analysis is a novel digital imaging technique that enhances the contrast between colors in a photograph. Archaeologist Noah Hidalgo Tan applied decorrelation stretch analysis to photographs he had taken of Angkor Wat's plaster walls. Tan's analysis revealed hundreds of images unknown to researchers. So basically, this temple was covered in all these different pictures, pictorial, but they had faded, so nobody could see them. But this technique brought out the contrast, and you were able to see them using this decorrelation stretch analysis to show how intricately decorated this temple was. A student wants to present Tan's research to an audience unfamiliar with Angkor Wat. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? A, Tan photographed Angkor Wat's plaster walls and then applied decorrelation stretch analysis to the photographs. Doesn't tell you anything about Angkor Wat, really, except that it has plaster walls. B, decorrelation stretch analysis is a novel digital imaging technique that Tan used to enhance the contrast between colors in a photograph. Again, no real information about Angkor Wat. Using a novel digital imaging technique, Tan revealed hundreds of images hidden on the walls of Angkor Wat, a Cambodian temple. So you're getting a lot of information there. First of all, you know it's Cambodian, you know it's a temple, and you know that you know its name, Angkor Wat. You also know that its walls have all kinds of images on them that were hidden because they had faded away, and he was able to bring those out. So that's pretty complete. D, built to honor a Hindu god before becoming a Buddhist temple, Cambodia's Angkor Wat concealed hundreds of images on its plaster walls. Well, I think that nothing about Tan's research is mentioned. You got to mention his digital imaging technique. Otherwise, it's incomplete, right? It says here the student wants to present Tan's research. So D does not include that. So C has to be the right answer. Okay. And I think we're done with this section. And now I need to go back and dig out the vocabulary list, which is very interesting and exciting today. Includes a lot of good words that I like. Let's take a look here. Okay, vocabulary list. And some of you have already researched the word, some of you have not. That's perfectly okay. Because we're going to go over everything together. There we go. It takes a little while for Word to open in my computer. I'll get it eventually. There we go. Okay. Oh, what's going on here? I had the same problem last week with this. Let's see. Just shrink this down. Okay. Back to Zoom. Share screen. There we go. Okay, here we go. So, first word on our list is shroud. Tell us what a shroud is.
A cover?
Yeah, it's a length of cloth used to wrap a dead body, a dead person for burial. Okay? So when you say that, have you ever heard of the Shroud of Turin? Supposedly in the Italian city of Turin, they found a piece of cloth, a big piece of cloth, and the image of Christ, the silhouette of Christ's body, was imprinted on the shroud. And this became known as a miracle. This was the cloth that Christ had been wrapped in after he was crucified, and the shroud that he'd been buried in. And apparently his body left an imprint on the shroud, so it became a very sacred relic. And people used to go to visit this holy place in order to see the Shroud of Turin. Okay, so that's something you want to remember. Now, whether or not that's scientifically valid, we don't know, but it was considered, one of the miracles, and that was considered a miraculous object. And it became a destination for Christians to basically go and worship and witness this miracle. They would make a pilgrimage to the city of Turin to see the shroud. You could look that up, the Shroud of Turin, get some more details on it. Splotch. What's a splotch?
A smear of liquid.
Yeah, it's usually a color, like some kind of color, like a painter put a splotch of blue in the middle of a yellow field. He was an abstract painter. But it generally refers to like something like color. You could also say there's a splotch of mud on the floor, that type of thing. So it's a blob or a smear or something. And it is usually a liquid, but it could be something thicker. It doesn't have to be like a ruddy liquid. Okay. Cupidity. We talked about this last week. That was one of the things that we discussed, remember? What is cupidity?
Greed for money and possessions.
Correct, 100% correct. And it came from basically the Roman meaning of desire, usually romantic desire. And of course, the god Cupid, who would hit people with their arrow and give them this romantic desire. But the word evolved and changed. And so cupidity stopped meaning love or romantic desire, and it turned into love of money and love of possessions. So if you say somebody is full of cupidity, it means they're very, very greedy. All they care about is having things, lots of things. Okay. It's not really a compliment. Dearth. What is a dearth?
A lack of something.
Yeah, it's a scarcity or lack of something. The president of the association suffered from a dearth of confidence. He didn't believe in himself. He was lacking confidence. Okay? So that's a good word, dearth. And that's German, I believe. It's not from Latin or from Greek. Debauch. What does it mean to debauch something?
To corrupt.
Yeah, to corrupt or destroy the purity of something. So the way you're going to see this word is debauchery, E-R-Y-T-N. And debauchery, when somebody lives a life of debauchery, all they're doing is satisfying their carnal appetites. They're overdoing it. Like they are eating too much, they're drinking too much wine, they have too many boyfriends or girlfriends. They're overdoing the sensual pleasures in life. Basically, they're living a useless existence. They've descended into debauchery. So that's how you're going to hear that term used, not so much as the verb debauch, but as the noun debauchery. And you will see that word quite a bit. Okay. Debunk. What does it mean to debunk something?
To expose the falseness.
Right, to prove something to be untrue, to prove that it's not that whatever idea or belief it is, that it's not valid. To debunk the theory that Vietnam War was started to protect Australia. You're debunking that theory. You're proving it's not really valid. Okay, so yes, that's the correct answer. And what is defunct? Defunct sounds like debunk, but it means something very different.
No longer functioning.
Yeah. Let's do something. Let's talk about the Committee on Student Representation is now defunct. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay. So basically, it means it's over. Doesn't exist, doesn't function. It's irrelevant. It's gone. It's defunct. Okay. What's a demagogue?
A leader who makes false promises to gain power.
Yes, he's a leader who manipulates the people. He uses their desires, their prejudices, their beliefs in things that aren't real, their superstition, whatever he can to manipulate them. And he's not doing it for their own good, he's doing it for his own good. So he's like a false leader, a demagogue. And we'll talk about this word when we do the etymology because the word has really changed a lot in its meaning. But if you're a demagogue, that doesn't mean that you're a good leader. It means you're a false leader. And then all you're really doing is trying to manipulate people for your own benefit. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good leader. Okay, so you don't want to be a demagogue. What does it mean to denigrate something?
To criticize unfairly.
Yeah, to disparage something, to criticize. Like, don't denigrate his efforts to be a track star. You know, don't basically say, you'll never do it. You don't have the skill, you don't have the talent. You know, you're not giving the guy a chance. You're being unfair. Uh, don't denigrate his accomplishments in science lab. He's done some good work. Don't say that he's useless in science lab when he's not. Don't denigrate the guy unfairly. So that is another good word. We're going to study that one. And what's a despot? A despot.
A dictator.
Yeah, a despot is somebody who has absolute power. Absolute. He says, off with his head, and they take the head off. Banish her to the tower, they put her in the tower. Let's confiscate all the food from the people. And the army confiscate. Absolute power when you're a despot. Nobody can challenge you. Okay? And despots are not good people. The word is not used to describe a noble, generous, and fair leader. Despot is somebody that just wants power, wants to control people, and doesn't care who he hurts. Okay? Now we're going to the etymology portion, which I find very fascinating. And the first word we're going to do is demagogue. Now, demagogue is from Greek. It's basically a prefix and a root. Demos means people, like democracy or demographic, right? And in Greek, agogos in Greek means leader. So a demagogue, people leader in ancient Greek. Here's the deal. In ancient Greece, a demagogue was a good person. He was a leader of the people. He was a guy that got things done for the country or for the state. And people needed the demagogues, and they were felt to be well motivated and adversaries for the people. The word changed into something very negative, and it became a very disparaging thing to say about someone. But initially, a demagogue was actually a good person. Everyone, you know, people do need a leader, right? But somehow the word got changed and it became an ugly thing. And I don't know if we really know why. So demos, meaning people, obviously democracy. Krasi basically means self-rule. So democracy means people ruling themselves. And then demographic is basically looking at the population of people in a given area. What are the demographics of the village? Be things like average age, average income, racial makeup, that kind of stuff. The demographics, like the US Census that they do every 10 years, measures the demographics of the United States. Okay, so that's where you get demos. But remember, the demagogue today is not what it was in ancient Greece. It's the exact opposite. Now, the other word is going to be a little surprising to you. Denigrate. It's from Latin, and D as a prefix in Latin normally means away from, down from, off from. You see what I mean? Devalue, to take away the value. But in some contexts, D is an emphasizer. It means absolutely. Whatever follows it, it doesn't mean to be away from it or to take away from it. It actually means to emphasize it completely. Okay? So don't think of D as being away from. Think of it as being intensely supporting whatever comes afterwards. And this word, nigrate, comes from the Latin nigrum, which means black or dark. So to denigrate someone is to make them absolutely, completely dark or black, to ruin their reputation, to attack them and destroy them. And of course, the word Negro comes from the same Latin root nigrum. Okay. But in this context, nigrum means black, dark, evil, ruined, destroyed. So when you denigrate someone, you blacken their name, you destroy their reputation, or you unfairly do that. Okay. And it is from the same root as Negro, from the Latin nigrum, but Negro is not a negative thing. It's just a description of someone's skin color. Okay. Now, there are probably some blacks who would object to ever using the word denigrate. But remember, this evolved thousands of years ago. And, you know, people often use the expression, his name was blackened. It wasn't referring to race. It just meant that his reputation was ruined. So understand the root that it comes from, but that it's a completely different meaning. Okay. And that's pretty much it, guys. So we had two words today, demagogue from the Greek and denigrate from the Latin. And they both have very interesting etymology. Now, does anyone have any questions for me? We finished a little early today, but we got a lot done. So I will pause for a second, see if anyone has any questions. No? Okay, guys. Well, we'll see you next week. I guess school is starting soon. So I encourage you guys to keep coming even during the school year. We're still going to do our sessions. And they'll be well worthwhile when you have to start taking tests and writing papers in high school. Okay, have a great evening. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Yeah.